So if I, and again, the recording has just started. So thank you very much, Emily, for doing that for me. So as I said at the beginning, my name's David Blackadder-Weinstein. I am a Strategic Communications Director at Turley and joined today by Emily, who is a consultant with Turley and many of you may have received emails from over the last few weeks. And we're here working with Stoford. So Ed, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Edward Peel. I'm a development manager at Stoford. My role at Worcester 6 is predominantly to attract investment and occupiers to the park. I'll run through some of the details of the occupiers that we have delivered on the existing site to date shortly.
Thanks, Ed. And Joe?
Hi, my name is Jo Russell. I'm a planning director at Stoford. My role will be to coordinate and prepare and submit the planning application for the southern extension.
Thank you very much, Joe. And Andy?
Hello everyone, I'm Andy Passmore, Director of BWB Consulting. I've been dealing with the transport issues and opportunities surrounding this site since 2015.
Thank you very much, Andy. And last but certainly not least, Matt. Oh, Matt, we haven't got your sound there.
Apologies, I double muted. Afternoon, everyone. My name's Matt Royal. I'm a principal with Ramble. I'm the environmental consultant for the project, and I've been working with Stoford since 2014 on this project.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Matt. So without further ado, we'll get on with the presentation. And Ed, over to you to give us some of the background on the site that everybody will be very familiar with.
Yeah, so as you've just said, David, I'm sure everybody's aware of where the site is located, just along the boundary of the M5, with junction 6 of the M5 just to the north. The image on the right there shows the existing business park to the northern section, and then the sites that we are bringing forward, the proposed extension to the south. Just to give you a bit of background, Stoford have been involved in the scheme since 2014. We first broke ground in 2015 and welcomed the first 2 buildings completed in 2017. So we've also been involved in the scheme for a few years now. We are very well versed in what's going on, and I'm looking forward to bringing forward the southern extension. Next slide. Okay.
Well, just that little bit of a delay there, Ed, but it's coming up, I can show you. There we go.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the first phase, we delivered the first 2 buildings in 2017, which were the buildings to the bottom left, units 3 and 4. We funded these 2 buildings with a US REIT called Liberty, and the reason that we did that was to open up the park from a presence point of view and a marketability to occupiers, but also to bring infrastructure to the site. One of the key things for occupiers in the market is to understand that the scheme can be delivered. So bringing these 2 units forward and installing the infrastructure on the park was key from a marketing perspective and as I say, to attract occupiers to the site. The first 2 buildings that were built and PC'd in 2017, we were fortunate to welcome our first occupier to the park into Unit 4, which is Material Solutions. They are a 3D printing business, very high tech and with a significant investment into that unit. So a really great occupier to welcome as our first presence on the site. The larger of the 2 units is unfortunately still vacant. We've had a number of conversations with occupiers on that site. The building has traded hands a few times with different investors. But yeah, unfortunately, we're still marketing the site and seeking occupiers for that unit. Working along, we've then got Spire Healthcare, 72,500 square foot units, which they use for, there's a significant amount of office accommodation in that unit. The remainder of the unit is for storage. The smaller Unit 2A, we built at the same time as the Spire unit and welcomed Cornelius Drinks. quite an interesting business involved in the cooling and dispensing of drinks to the F&B industry. They actually welcomed our first bar, although not operational, to the site. Moving over to the other side of the business park, to the top left corner, we welcome Kimmel. They are the manufacturer and supplier of specialist procedure packs and cannulas to the healthcare industry. Again, a really interesting business that moved over from Droitwich. They occupy 140,000 square feet. Colamira, it was the largest occupier that we've welcomed to the park. You may recognise Myra Showers. They've taken this facility with a significant amount of offices on the front elevation and are predominantly involved in the production and supply of bathroom equipment. And then the slightly strange looking Unit 6 is for Ionos, a data centre operator originated out of Germany. We are on site with that unit at the moment, looking to complete the building in August this year. Again, a really great occupier for us to welcome to the park, to the technology and the investment they're putting into that unit. The final one that I've not mentioned so far is Zwick, the smaller unit, which is offices, approximately 20,000 square feet, with a small storage unit behind. We have agreed terms with Zwick. We've secured reserve matters planning consent, and we're hoping to be on site with them towards the end of the year. So that ticks off the green units on the plan. The red units are indicative. We are hoping to clearly attract further investment into the site. Those units may change in size and shape as we agree terms with occupiers moving forward.
There you go, and eventually get on the right slide.
That's all right, no problem. I'm sure you've all been on the website, and these items have been pulled from that, really, the key benefits of the scheme. To date, we've had an investment of circa £75 million into the scheme. And a part of that is a significant investment from foreign investment. So we've had over 50 million of the 75 is from foreign investors. We've installed additional cycleways over the footbridge over the M5. We are proposing to reroute the bus route, which goes down towards the hospital, through the scheme in due course. We're hoping that will be operational towards the end of the year, and Andy will talk to you that in further detail later. And quite high on our agenda at Stoford is the sustainable elements of the buildings that we're bringing forward. We are installing EV charging points, PV across the roofs where possible, and looking to basically reduce our carbon impact through development, ensuring that we can deliver net carbon zero buildings where possible moving forward. One point I didn't pick up on when talking about occupiers is the jobs that have been delivered on the scheme to date. So I know David mentioned that we've had a question on this in terms of the number of jobs that are being delivered, and how many we're anticipating being delivered on the southern extension. It's very difficult to put an exact number to the jobs that will be delivered, because it ultimately depends on the occupiers that we attract. We've seen that on the site to date where, for example, Cornelius Drinks, although the smallest unit on the park, attracts more than Colamira as the largest. So what we are keen on is ensuring that we're attracting the right occupiers and clearly trying to deliver highly skilled jobs to the park where possible.
Thanks very much, Ed. Yeah, really useful overview of what's happened to date. And looking to the future then, we'll move over to Joe. And Joe, you can talk us through the southern extension that we're here to discuss today.
Thank you. So this is the first of two slides, which will show the site that we are going to be applying for planning permission for. So this being the southern extension. So here on this slide, you can see the majority of the site, which is the northern part, and then the southern part in the bottom left-hand corner of that picture. So the site itself is linear, clearly, and it's around 14 hectares in terms of its developed area. So in terms of what that actually means, we're looking to bring forward 63,000 square metres of development. That's about equivalent to what we've currently built on the existing park to the north so far. We'll also be looking to bring forward the same types of uses. So those are uses within the manufacturing, research and development, some office uses, and also those within logistics and warehousing. So the same uses that we've delivered thus far at Worcester 6 are what we would look to attract to the southern extension. In terms of the types of buildings, and this shows an illustrative layout, so what types of buildings and sizes we might expect on the park, and clearly, as Ed has said, they will be very much driven by the occupiers that we will look to attract here. But you could expect that the buildings would be between 13 and 18 metres in height. Again, that's quite similar to those buildings on the North Park at the moment. I think Colamire is our biggest at just over 16 metres. In terms of around the buildings themselves, there will be some green linkages, which my colleague will speak about in a moment. But key to this park, we are looking to both retain and enhance the footpath and cycleway, which runs along the top of that drawing. It's just depicted by the numbers 3 and 4 along the top there. And that cycleway and footpath currently exists and connects over the M5. We're looking to ensure connections from it up to the new units to ensure that remains a sustainable route. In terms of vehicular access to the park, there'll be 3 points. One, from the existing park, as you can see there to the top of the drawing. Secondly, the existing access just behind Materials Solutions, and the new access, which will be our primary point of access for a bus route that's shown with the orange circle that just links between the north and south parts of that park. And that's obviously really important for us to get that bus route in there so that we can have it loop through to the northern existing park. In terms of green infrastructure across the site, we're having a mix here between 40% green infrastructure and 60% built form, and that's in line with the council's emerging policy within their development plan. I think it's perhaps appropriate that I can now hand over to Matt.
Thank you, Jo. I'll cover some of the environmental elements of the project. For this scheme, we're very much proposing to build on the ecological principles we developed for the existing park. So we've worked hard with the council and the Wildlife Trust to implement ecological improvements, and they'll also be implemented on this site as well. Very much the layout has considered the existing habitats, so it's looking at retaining trees in the north of the south of the site, and the hedgerows by the site entrance and along the site boundaries as well. We've also thought about the existing habitats in terms of the river, and there will be a buffer to that location there, and also a buffer to the ancient woodland, which is off-site to the north. The proposed landscaping and drainage very much also will have ecological benefit. So there will be a case of further tree planting. There will be a net gain on hedgerows. And also within the south of the site, there'll be a proposed wildflower meadow, which will be attractive to a number of different species. In addition to those elements, there will be certain ecological enhancements within the development plots themselves. So as shown on the slide there, dependent on occupier demand requirements, that we propose to have green cycle shelters, green bus shelters, and very much adopt very similar principles that have been undertaken on the existing site. So that will include things such as bird and bat boxes, and also habitat log piles, and pollinator posts for bees, which we've been using at the existing site to the north. Another element to note, just think about the environmental elements, is the layout of the buildings. It's very much the proposed layout is considered the visual impact, so that the buildings are orientated very much, think about the estates road, and then using the existing levels and also the existing vegetation to minimise the views from the B4636. That's it from me on the environmental aspects.
Thank you very much, Matt. Joe, is there anything you want to say about the southern plot of the southern extension before we move on to talk about design and wellbeing?
Well, yes, to continue what Matt's just explained, I think those environmental enhancements will continue through into the south plot, right through to the bottom point corner there, where you can see the planting of a wildflower meadow, and the use of native plantings throughout the site will be part of our landscaping strategy. So onto design and wellbeing. I think none of us can escape that over the last 12 months now, we've very much been in a much different working environment to what we were used to before. And the design and wellbeing element within our business parks is now very much at the forefront. I, for one, and I'm sure those listening, very much value the open space, either whether that's outside of my home or outside of my workspace, as an area where I can go and take a break very much from the screen. So that is, well, firstly, how we look at our park, the design principles will very much be taken from those on the existing park to the north. So we very much look to continue that theme that we have for those that have walked around the park at the moment, in terms of the modern light buildings, the sort of the crispness in the design, the colour palette in particular will be continued throughout to the south, the use of the whites, the greys, and then accent colours as appropriate. And I think it's perhaps just worth noting here something that came up in one of our earlier discussions with the parish council, is how over the years since 2015 we've sought to adjust the design within the park, responding with more recent units having a slightly darker roof scape than what the first two units were. And that's again referencing back to earlier comments which suggests that in some locations the lighter roofs give more reflection when viewed from afar, and therefore we've looked to introduce slightly darker colours to those roofs to try to minimise that impact. In terms of wellbeing measures, the use of green infrastructure within our park is very important to us, and its interpretation as well. We've got a great deal of archaeological history within the park, and we're looking to reflect that through our new interpretation boards, which will be coming onto site shortly, and also those that will give details about the ecology of the site, as explained by Matt earlier on. Again, making sure that we have active office frontages, so that's areas whereby our pathways, our car parking areas, and the roads are overlooked by office receptions or areas of office working where we've got windows overlooking those, to provide that natural surveillance and ensure personal safety, in addition to the CCTV scheme which we've got, which runs throughout the park and will be extended into the southern extension. There are further green infrastructure opportunities, as we've discussed, and ways of ensuring biodiversity continues into the southern site. There are walking and cycling opportunities already, which enables employees or visitors to the park to take advantage of those in the time that allows. And also for employees, again, we'll be looking to provide outdoor seating areas within our plots, which will obviously enhance the well-being of employees throughout the working day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. I'm sure we'll have a couple of questions on that when we come to the end, but before that, we're going to move on to transport and Andy.
Thank you. Can we move on there? Thank you. Several transport improvement schemes were required as part of the 2015 planning permission for the business park. And these were based on the findings of the supporting transport assessment. The aim of these works, not necessarily to resolve existing problems, but to mitigate the impact of the traffic generated by the development and to encourage travel by sustainable modes. So in terms of highway improvements, M5 Junction 6 was improved by Highways England to facilitate growth in the wider Worcester area. And this included for the forecast traffic generated by Worcester 6. The site access works, so the roundabouts and the secondary access on Newtown Road and improvements to the Pershore Lane, Plough Lane roundabout were all implemented in 2016. And a contribution was provided in lieu of works at the Grange Way roundabout. This was a contribution towards a more comprehensive scheme that Worcestershire County Council would bring forward in the future, associated with a number of other schemes that are going on in the area. So from a highways perspective, the impact of the development traffic envisaged at that time was mitigated in that 2015 consent. In terms of sustainable travel, the route over the M5 to Trotts Hill Way was improved. A new toucan crossings, that's a crossing for cyclists and for pedestrians, was constructed on Trotts Hill Way, and a contribution provided to improvements and enhancements to pedestrian and cycle facilities in that residential area to the west of the site. This is where the majority of people walking and cycling to the site were envisaged to be originating. In terms of the bus provision, quite a substantial contribution was provided to Worcestershire County Council based on a business case that was put forward on the development of the site and the increasing patronage as the site develops out. That was originally going to be an extension or a diversion of the 346 or the W6 services, and bus stops, bus shelters and such like have been put on the site to facilitate that. Unfortunately, due to the COVID restrictions, the travel restrictions and the restrictions on bus services, that hasn't yet been implemented, but we're hoping that as sort of lockdown eases off, that the public transport service will be implemented towards the end of this year. As was alluded to earlier, electric vehicle parking is something that's been taken very seriously on site, with up to 10% of the parking spaces enabled for electric vehicle charging, and there's a travel plan for the wider site to try and encourage travel by sustainable modes. So all those improvements were identified on the basis of the traffic generated by sort of high-tech occupiers envisaged at the time, and those reflected a particular mix of offices, light industrial, general industrial and warehouse buildings. So this mix has not really been realised, and whilst the current occupiers are high-tech, they aren't necessarily the high-intensity operations that were previously envisaged. This is also the expectation for the future market demand for the site. So Stoford had taken the opportunity to alter the existing planning consent to better reflect the expected future occupiers. And this will result in the existing park only generating around 2/3 of the peak hour traffic originally assumed, and upon which all the transport improvements were based. This means there is around 1/3 of the traffic that has already been mitigated, but has not been realised by the existing park. The analysis that we've undertaken over the past year has demonstrated that traffic generated by the proposed extension, the southern extension, would fall within this unrealised quantum and would therefore not result in additional highway impact. This work has been shared with both Worcestershire County Council and Highways England, and has been accepted. In terms of access, a third access is proposed to the site, primarily to provide an improved route through the site to ensure that those southern units that were shown on the master plan are accessible to public transport. The location of the access is close to the existing bridleway, and we will be looking at incorporating crossing facilities and cycle facilities to try and improve accessibility to that bridleway, and potentially looking at measures such as a reduction in speed along that road. We are in discussions with Worcestershire County Council about the detail of that access, but obviously that will be included within the planning application when it comes forward.
Thanks, Andy. Just before we move on, I'm sure you can imagine we've had a couple of questions on transport. One from Daniel. There are often traffic queues on the B4636 back to the existing site. So how will the infrastructure cope with the additional traffic, with the junction 6 asking traffic to the hospital to be taken through the B4636, and that was pre-COVID?
Yeah, so as we said, as I said previously, the aim of the transport assessment and the highway improvements that have been implemented are to mitigate the impact of the development, not to resolve existing problems. So providing the queues after implementation of the development are no worse than they were prior to the implementation of the development and its mitigation, then in terms of our planning system that we operate under, that is satisfactory mitigation for a development. So it's not the developer's responsibility to resolve existing problems. It is to ensure that those problems do not worsen as a consequence of the development. That will all be included within the transport assessment that we will need to submit and agree with both Highways England and Worcestershire County Council.
Thanks, Andy. And a question we've had from Roger Clark again on traffic, and you touched on it before, but Roger asks, what's being done to prevent traffic congestion between the site and junction 6? This comes into that parcel that was mitigated previously, and where you think the quantum of demand might actually be lower than expected.
Yeah, so the improvement works that have been implemented catered for a certain envelope of traffic. We call it a trip generation envelope. So it was a certain quantum of traffic that had been mitigated by the various improvement works, including the works at junction 6 of the M5. So we're not expecting the development, the extension, to go above that threshold, simply because the existing park has been generating far less traffic than was originally anticipated.
Okay, thanks, Andy. I dare say we'll have a couple more to come to before the end of the session. So I'm just going to move on for a moment and talk about the consultation itself, which obviously this webinar is part of. And thank you ever so much again to everybody for taking the time this evening to join us, ask us questions and find out more about the project. Many of you may have come direct to sign up to the webinar from the Facebook and LinkedIn adverts that we put out over social media over the last week or so, in which case you may not have actually visited the consultation website itself. So the address is there for you, www.worcester6.co.uk/consultation. Although many of you will have visited that site already to review the proposals and sign up for this webinar. If you haven't, please do go and take a look. Plenty more information about the site, as well as the Worcester 6 Business Park more generally. Really useful on there. There's a frequently asked questions page, which, as you imagine, has got answers to plenty of frequently asked questions, but also we can update that following this webinar. So questions that are asked here this evening, we can pop on there too and update with answers from the project team. And a feedback form on that website too for you guys to fill in and tell us what you think about the proposals, and then those will be submitted as part of our statement of community involvement, which goes in with the planning application. As I said, this webinar is recording, so this recording itself will be made available on that website as well for you to review at your leisure afterwards, should you wish to do so, or for anybody you know who's interested and hasn't had an opportunity to join us this evening to log on and watch the webinar, watch the presentation and the question and answer session that follows. And until the 22nd of March to log on and give us your feedback. So that consultation opened on the 8th of March and runs for 2 weeks until 22nd of March, which I believe is next Monday. So we have got a couple more questions that have come in. I'll touch on these first. before I then go back to some of the questions that we had sent to us in advance. Ed, one for you, I think. Roger asks, why is the southern extension needed as many units on the existing site are still unoccupied?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Roger. There's a couple of reasons for that. The first one being the speed that we're working through the existing estate or business park. There's 1.5 million square feet consented under the outline for the existing business park. We've got through over 800,000 square feet of reserve matters consent and delivered over 700,000 square foot of buildings in the last 3.5 to 4 years. So the rate that we're working through the business park is ultimately driving a requirement for further land to the south. And the next point is the flexibility that we're looking to provide occupiers. So the larger plot to the north of the data centre we're delivering for IONOS. We've got 2 conversations going on at the moment with occupiers on those plots. And ultimately, we could take out that plot with 1 transaction to an occupier. So what we're trying to do is provide ourselves with further land to be delivered for the needs of occupiers as their requirements come forward.
Thanks, Ed. We've had a couple of questions from Moira. One on the landscaping side. These buildings are very ugly. How do you propose to phase them into the beautiful countryside around them? I'll start with Matt and then Joe, if there's anything else you want to add.
Thank you for the comment, Moira. In terms of the buildings, it's also considering the setting, and so there will be proposals for new tree planting and also enhancing the hedgerows and so on. So that will soften those views and also outline that sort of park sense, that it won't purely be just buildings in isolation. So there's very much a key part of the overall view will be the green infrastructure. And then Joe, maybe do you want to talk about the building treatment?
Yes, and also just to expand on what you've just said there, Matt, one of the documents we need to prepare as part of the planning application is a landscape visual impact assessment. And that document will look at views of the site from public footpaths, for example, or from elevated locations. So, for example, Tiverton to the east. And that document will consider those views and the impact of the proposals before proposing what is the appropriate landscape strategy, which may include planting, which may involve the positioning of buildings, but then moving on to the actual buildings themselves. Clearly, we want to try and create a cohesive scheme with what's gone before, but using a colour palette to try to minimise the visibility of those buildings, and then again layering it so that when you look at it, particularly from the east, the first thing you see is that very strong landscaping buffer, which would be about 15 metres. Beyond that will be buildings, beyond that will be further landscaping, and so on through the site. And that's our approach and strategy to minimising those visual impacts.
Thanks very much, Joe. That connects to a question that we had previously, I think, ahead of times about the landscaping and how clearly that the trees that are planted aren't necessarily mature at the moment. They're planted and some of them don't take. And Ed, that's something which we've discussed previously.
Yeah, so we've appointed a management company to oversee the park as a whole, and the trees that have been planted that aren't taking under the maintenance period, we will arrange for those to be replaced. We obviously try to plant trees that are mature enough to take, but not always the case, and often is dependent on the weather and making sure we get enough rain at the time. So any that don't take, we will make sure that they are replaced. Clearly it's a key aspect of the park to make sure that the landscaping is taking and attractive.
And obviously it's a long-term deal, isn't it? These things continue to grow and mature over time, and not necessarily from day one. And it's still early days in the lifetime of the park. A question in from Philip about the potential for smaller office units. Ed, any plans for smaller office units? One of my businesses looking for about 500 square feet along the M5 corridor, struggling to find space. Also with the growth of co-working,
Yeah, I can pick that one up. So thank you for the question, Philip. We have looked at doing an office scheme on the front, but it was larger than what you're proposing. The building that we're delivering for Zwick, and we're hoping to be on site towards the end of the year, they've actually committed to building double the amount of office space that they require with a central core, which ultimately gives them the ability to sublet office space to occupiers like yourself. So I'm sure that we'll be able to share the details of the scheme and put you in contact and have conversations with Zwick directly at the time, and hopefully we'll be able to work with you on something there.
Great, thanks, Ed. Daniel asks another question. As a resident, how can we as residents nearby be confident in what you're saying when the current buildings are not attractive and the light roofing on a bright day is horrendous and makes the building stand out from a great distance? Joe, the roofing and the colour of the roofs is something which has been addressed following those first buildings that were built, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, it has, David. So the first 2 units that were built on the park, as Ed explained, were Material Solutions, and the one next to it, which was L163. They've got much lighter roofs in terms of their shading than those that have been built since. As a result of those first 2 units being built and the impacts of them, it was the planning committee that requested that we look at a darker roofing colour, which we did. We took that darker roof colour back to committee for members to approve, and that has noticeably changed the amount of reflection properties from that roof. I think it's fair to say it is a difficult area, not least because the darker one makes a roof in terms of its colour, then you're then actually fighting against the energy efficiency of that roof, because a darker enclosure will retain heat within the building and then put a greater requirement on the need for air conditioning. And clearly we've already spoken about how we're trying to reduce the carbon footprint of our buildings. So we are sort of treading that fine balance here between having a roof colour which does minimise its impact, whilst also ensuring that the energy efficiency properties of the building are maintained. But that point has been taken on board. Thank you.
Joe, sticking with visual impact, a question from Nick Capel, who Nick, thank you very much for your question and for sending us questions in advance as well. We touched on this earlier with regards to the landscaping, but Nick says, you appear to be downplaying the existing visual impact. We're southeast of the site and have sun reflecting off the shiny sheds, making them an eyesore for most of the day. Given that the build started several years ago now, is it realistic to claim that trees will work, walls as well as roofs are the problem? So a question there, Joe, if you want to pick up, and Matt,
yeah.
maybe you want to add.
Yes, thank you. And as I did mention, the planning application that we're preparing will include a landscape visual impact assessment, and part of that will look at views from around the local area towards the site. I can't say precisely where each of those viewpoints will be taken from at this point in time. I think would be helpful if David, I think you said it was, if you was to add into the Q&A session the particular location, the viewpoint from which the site is most visible to him. We can cross-check whether that falls within our scope of viewpoints that we're looking at as part of our reporting that we'll be doing over the next few weeks. I think that's perhaps the easiest way that we can pick up on that particular point, and at least then our professional team, which are doing the impact assessment, will be able to go to that viewpoint, take the appropriate photographs and do the analysis, which then David can look at as part of the application process. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Nick has given us his location there, so we can pick that up. And Nick, I believe you've emailed us previously at the consultation website as well, so we've got your email address and can be in touch directly regarding that particular issue. A question from Moira regarding since the building from Parsonage Way, Grange Way and Nunnery Way, the amount of litter has visibly increased on both sides of the roads. how you intend to reduce the dumping of rubbish and fly tipping. So, Andy, if that's one we can pick up with you first with regards, we've had questions about Grange Way and Nunnery Way regarding the roundabout in advance as well, and then move on to thinking about if there's anything that can be done from a Stowford perspective about any litter may or may not be connected to the business park itself.
Well, in terms of the previous assessments that were undertaken, there was an identified need to mitigate the impact of the development at that junction, and Worcestershire County Council requested that was in the form of a contribution, a financial contribution, towards a more comprehensive scheme as additional development comes forward in that area. So from the developer's perspective, they have fulfilled their obligations. No improvements have been made yet to that junction, and they won't be made, I suggest, until Worcestershire County Council have established the impact of a number of other developments in that area. So yeah, from a developer's perspective, the financial contribution has been paid, but you won't have seen the physical improvements at this stage.
Okay. And Ed, Joe, from a litter perspective,
yeah, so just from an on-site litter perspective and the coming around fly tipping, we have experienced that on site. We've got CCTV throughout the park, which obviously has highlighted the issue, so we can get that reported, and we've ensured that the management company have ensured that those occurrences have been cleared up. So from an on-site perspective, we're obviously monitoring what's going on in the park through the CCTVs and ensuring that any litter and fly tipping is cleared and sorted.
Ed, another prospective tenant, L. Roberts, Eric Matthews, we are looking for a 5,000 to 10,000 square foot warehouse. Will these requirements be too small for the site?
No, so the units we've delivered to date have been on the larger side. We are currently considering whether we look at a sort of a trade counter type unit, which will be able to subdivide into smaller units. So it's something that would be certainly welcome to have a discussion on.
A couple of questions on lighting. So one from an anonymous attendee, the night lighting pollution is having a huge impact on the area. What's being done about this? And a related question from Colby Woodall, will the prominent plots have higher quality design? I thought the lighting on the Kohler, the Kohler logo Myra looked good when I passed it on the M5 last night. So a couple of questions about lighting there.
Do you want me to take those, David?
Go for it, Joe.
Okay, so again, as part of our planning application, we are required to put forward a lighting strategy. Excuse me, and that lighting strategy will look at the potential for lighting and how that will be rolled out across the park and what potential impacts might arise from that. It will also be looked at as part of any environmental impact assessment if we need to prepare that particular document, and we're in the process of discussing that at the moment with the council and its consultees. In terms of the specifics of lighting, this again was raised in the discussion we had with the parish council. And clearly our existing park is subject to a lighting strategy. What we've done over the last few weeks, whilst we've had those darker nights, has been to go out and take photographs, particularly from the high ground to the east, looking down towards the park, so that we can see the impact of that lighting in the evening, and then use that as part of our lighting strategy and assessment work going forwards to look at how we may either address that lighting in future, whether there needs to change the location of the lighting. But clearly the one thing we do look to do is to minimise the amount of lighting we use. So using that only where it's necessary, on our yards, in areas for security, and making sure that where we've got 24-hour operations, that those areas are lit in accordance with British standards, because clearly this is a health and safety impact that we need to have to the park. And unfortunately, having no lighting at night isn't an option to us. So it's about, again, finding that balance, but there will be a technical report done as part of our planning application.
Thank you very much, Joe. Just picking up in the chat now, there was a statement, if you like, from William Bloss. Thank you, William. Thanks for the overview. My interest in the scheme arose as a Worcester resident, but it's professionally linked. I work at the University of Birmingham, where I'm a professor of atmospheric science and lead a major project working with stakeholders, local authorities, various consultancies, and others across the region to apply latest science and support of improvements in air quality and health. So there's a little bit more information there, but one for Joe and Ed to pick up afterwards with regards to air quality and the M5. So thank you very much, William. I think that exhausts the questions. There aren't any more open questions at the moment. Just, of course, just as I say that, another one has come in. The original promise for Worcester 6 was for 5,000 jobs. How many jobs have actually been delivered? And Ed, you've touched on jobs before. There's a bit of a Hobson's choice here, isn't there, between concerns about traffic on the one hand. Obviously, the more jobs there are, the more traffic there's likely to be. On the other hand, fewer jobs being delivered, which is obviously good news from a traffic perspective, but it varies depending on the sort of units, and also the pandemic that we've just had is obviously changing the way we work and the number of people who are on site. But Ed, is there anything you want to add to that on the number of jobs beyond what you said earlier?
No, just adding to, well, reiterating what I said earlier, really, that it really does depend on the occupier. So the next occupier that comes along may be for hundreds of jobs, but what we've attracted to date has been high quality jobs and high quality occupiers, which, you know, we're looking to continue. But yeah, clearly trying to drive as much employment out of the site as we can at the same time.
Thank you, Ed. Another question from Moira. Who did you advise at the parish council, as until it appeared on Facebook, no one seems to know about it? So we've had several meetings in advance of this webinar with local representatives. We met with Councillor Adams and Councillor Robertson to the south of the site, as well as Councillor Rowley in Tiverton. Virtually met, I should say. Had meetings with parish councils of Tiverton and Crowell as well, and asked them to circulate awareness of the consultation amongst their own networks. So from an elected member perspective and representative perspective, we've been sure to make sure that we speak to the local ward and parish councils. Moira, thank you very much for asking that. Again, so we are currently at just a little less than 10 minutes to go. Again, Nick on the job saying that didn't seem to answer the jobs question. Would I be right to guess that 200 is closer than 5,000? I think it's fair to say, you know, there's certainly many fewer than 5,000 jobs on site at the moment.
Yeah, there are a lot less than 5,000. As we bring forward reserve matters applications, with each application that's brought forward, we do detail the number of jobs that are likely to be provided. Yes, it is significantly less than the 5,000 that was originally envisaged. Yeah, and you know, working from personal experience as well, it can become a hostage fortune with jobs projections that can be worked out based on square footage and all sorts of different ways of trying to project into the future. But I'm sure, as we're all aware from the last year that we've lived through, very large changing demands on office space and logistics space and warehouse space and all sorts of space. So difficult to make projections about exact numbers of jobs into the future, but certainly I think we can be confident about the demand for commercial space, as clearly Stoford is through the outline application that they're looking to put through in the next month or so. Okay. Well, okay, we've got no further questions, and I think we can wrap it up there. This does not mean it's the last opportunity to ask us anything. Please, as I said before, go onto the website. Give us your feedback via that feedback form. There's an email address and a telephone number there as well. You can give us a call, and probably be Emily that gives you a call back. Similarly, an email address. Send us an email with any questions, and we can be more specific, just as we were there about that. The question about the view from a specific area, we can come back to you on that, and we'll make sure that we share that with Joe and Ed afterwards. Okay. Well, I'd just like to say thank you very much, everybody, for your time. I hope you have a lovely evening. Unbelievably, it's still just about light outside, which is
nice reminder that spring's on its way. So thank you very much, and I will make sure that we continue to keep the conversation open until that consultation finishes on the 22nd. Thank you very much. And then